Assalamu alaikum. I think for this video I kind of want to incorporate a little bit more of my personal experiences while talking about some of these more theoretical concepts and frameworks regarding like racism and white supremacy and things like that. So to delve into a little bit more of my personal experiences, I just want to I've been thinking a little bit. There's been some thoughts percolating in my head over this past weekend based on some of the experiences I've had in the retail world. So, as a brown person, as a person of color, someone who has more melanin than white people do, I am constantly reminded of not only my social class, being a brown person, my presumptive social class, might I say, based on what white people think of me, but I'm also constantly cognizant of that, right? Like I'm fully aware that I can never just be myself. I can never act like a white person and just freely roam around the world wherever I am and be free of the presumptions that white supremacy has on me and my kind. So what this means is the last past 2 days, I went shopping to get some warm winter clothes. So I'm here in this glove section, right? I'm buying gloves, and there's this entire rack full of gloves, just gloves on gloves on gloves. And I'm looking through them, and I'm kind of like picking through, which ones actually have this really cool like touch screen feature where you can actually touch your touch screen phone while you're wearing your gloves. So I'm looking through that, and I'm like, ooh, these are cool, And this white woman comes up behind me, and she's like, oh, do you work here? Do you know where the... And I just looked at her, and I gave her the dirtiest look. I was like, me? I mean, what? I gave her this look, and she straight up was like, oh, I'm sorry, you look so official with your little basket. And I just gave her even dirtier look. I was just like, you want to keep going? You are just digging yourself a deeper hole, miss. So anyways, I just, it's funny to me now, but I was pretty mad. I was pretty mad because that was actually the second time that happened within the past 20 minutes. Right? Like this black woman actually earlier had asked me if I worked at the store too. And I was just like, oh my gosh. I was just like, apparently, being a person of color means that you work at the store. And it's not like, obviously I wasn't shopping at like, what are those, some of those expensive stores? I don't even know because I don't even shop at them. But anyways, it was just like, a discount store. Like it was similar to a TJ Maxx type of thing, right? So I was just like, okay, so only people of color here work here. And what's interesting is that the woman of color, the black woman who asked me if I worked there, that in and of itself is, I would argue, a product of white supremacist society, right? Like when you think of how deeply penetrating white ideology is, it has penetrated through to people of color. Even myself, I have made the mistake of presuming that another person of color works at a certain store when they were just a customer because of this constant reminder, this constant like propaganda that white supremacy has put forth that only people of color work in the service industries. When's the last time you saw a white person work at McDonald's? I mean, unless you're like from the Midwest or something. I mean, over here on the West Coast and the East Coast, it's all people of color, especially in the fast food industry, especially at McDonald's. And I had actually read this really interesting article a few days ago talking about how this white girl was told by her family that she shouldn't work at McDonald's anymore, not because, a class thing or something like that. It was because they were telling her she's too good for it. She was saying like, oh, why am I too good for it? And she was basically saying that, oh, I'm too good for it because I'm white. I think the same thing happens happened along the same lines of when I had gone shopping. I mean, I'm just an innocent little shopper here, and all of a sudden I'm getting bombarded by like, ooh, you must work here because you're brown, and I just like I'm so tired of it. And I was gonna say that it's only white people that do that, because usually it is. But the black woman who did that threw me off. And then that's when I realized, like, you know what? That in and of itself is still a product of white supremacy. You may think that, oh, only white people act like white people. But it's not true. It's not true. It is not true. Not white people are not the only people who act like white people. People of color act like white people too. And unfortunately, that is a ramification and a byproduct of white supremacy. And unfortunately, so many of us, people of color, do not realize how we say what we say and who we're saying it to and what all of it means, right? Like, we don't understand that, like, when we presume that another person of color works at a retail store, we're presuming that someone of their kind is in the proper place by being the sales associate. And if you notice, like, it's usually the upscale stores that don't usually hire a lot of people of color. Or if they do, they're working in the back or, like, somewhere not visible. So let me tell you this other part, right, that happened just today, just a few hours ago. I was shopping at not a discount store. I was shopping at Ann Taylor Loft. So I'm here. I'm like going through the sales rack, got my little sweaters and everything, and I'm going to the fitting rooms, and it's a white woman there. And of course, like, I'm not gonna lie, a little thunderbolt of terror just goes through my spine every time I have to interact with a white person in a retail shop. And this is not an exaggeration, okay? It's like a terror thunder, like, bum, 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 white person, get ready for the interaction, you are going to be racist against. And, like, it just happens every single time. And guess what? It happened this time, too. So, I mean, it's like a minor trauma that you go through every time, right? It's like PTSD when you go shopping. So, I mean, if I already had these two experiences yesterday, I was like, I don't even know what I'm in for today. So, and then I went in, and the minute I came out, she's like following me with her eyes, like this. And then, of course, I feel her eyes on me because all you people of color, you know what it feels like to be like the lone person of color. You know what I mean? And so it turns out this lady's French, or I'm presuming she's French. Look at me presuming, because she has a very thick French accent. And then she looks at me and she starts like whispering. She's like, oh, like, if you sign up for the Ann Taylor Loft card, then you're gonna get like 80% off on top of whatever else you're buying today. So even your sales rack stuff, which is now 40% off, is now gonna be 60% off. Or I don't even remember the numbers. And she's just like talking to me as if she's like, on the DL, like, I'm hooking you up, even though, like, I'm just taking advantage of you and you don't know it because you look like you're a person of color who doesn't know anything better than to, like, listen to me and just get this credit card. And I just, honestly, that's what I heard her saying. Like, she could have said, like, something completely different, and all I heard her say was, like, that. Like, when you watch, like, funny sitcoms or, like, things like TV shows or animations, and, like, they have, like, the actors, like, saying something, but then, like, the thoughts in the person's head are actually what is coming out of that person's mouth. Like, that's what happened to me. So she's like looking at me and like trying to like hook me up with this card, and I was just like, oh no, thank you, I'm not interested. And like I had to cut her off because she kept talking. I was like, no, thank you, I'm not interested, I'm sorry, but thank you very much. I was trying to be as diplomatic as possible. And then she straight up dropped it. She was like, oh, okay, well, that's fine. Hang on the clothes on the little hanger and on the rack. And I'm just like, okay, so you're just gonna drop me like that just because I didn't get you your little 10% commission? And then it's just like, would she act that way to a white person? Like, does she go to white people after they've come out of the fitting room and like prey on them like a tiger and deer? Like, oh my God, you're gonna get 80% off. Like, leave me alone, woman. So anyways, it really does ruin shopping, which can be very therapeutic for me. I was just trying to get my me time, and this woman and all these other white women who just like impose their presumptions on me just completely ruined my day and my experience. And it really takes a toll. It really takes a toll over time. Like, I just don't know how much more I can handle this. I feel like I have to put on makeup. I have to put on real nice clothes. I have to dress up in order to get any respect, in order to be treated like I am not like just, this random just walker by. I don't even want to say like low class, because I am low class, but I'm not even able to be comfortably low class. And that's a sad part, right? Like, white people can still be comfortably lower class without having this other predisposed presumptions of who they are. Like, they can be poor and they can still like make it in the world, which is why when white people say like, oh, I grew up poor, that doesn't mean that I experienced privilege. No, you're white. You experience all the privileges. You don't get to get shot down on the street. Police officers don't just stop and frisk you. You get to breathe when you're arrested, if you're arrested. You don't get racially profiled at the airport. Your name doesn't get tossed away. Your resume doesn't get tossed away based on your name. So do not talk to me as if you don't experience privilege as a white person just because you are lower class. Because guess what? For those of us who are lower class and a person of color and a religious minority and a woman, I'm just so angry. So when I talk about racism and white supremacy and my daily experiences with it, and some people may actually look into it as if like I'm overanalyzing or whatever. No, I'm talking about white supremacy and racism because they are so deeply ingrained in our society that nothing I can say or do escapes it. White supremacy is the basis of racism, just like patriarchy is the basis of sexism. So if everyone is born into a system of patriarchy, of white supremacy, which thus puts them into a system of sexism and racism, where male bodies are valued over female bodies, where white bodies are valued over black bodies, then how can you say that you can just opt out of a system? No one can opt out of a system. You can't just wake up one day and say, oh, I'm not part of this world anymore, unless you're dead. I mean, you can't. You are a part of the system and you are participating in it, whether you are actively participating in it or you are a bystander. You are still participating in it. That's why when people say we should work towards climate change and stuff like that. Yeah, we can talk all day long about climate change. But if you're not recycling, if you're not watching how much water you waste or how much fumes you're putting out in the air with your with your car, or whether it's the sprays that you use, whatever it is, if you are not actively thinking about how to combat climate change, then you are actually perpetuating it. Just because you are out there and you're commenting on it and how oh man, the world needs to change, and oh my gosh, this environment and this and that, the ozone layer, the ozone layer is getting so big, you're still participating in it if you're not doing anything about it. And racism works the same way. You are still participating in racism every day. And if you aren't doing something about it, you are perpetuating it, especially if you are white. If you are not actively talking out, if you are not actively telling other white people to shut up when they say something problematic, when you are not actively calling them out for the way they think and how problematic some of their mentality can be. I mean, it doesn't even have to be something that big. It can even be something as simple as checking yourself, right? You have to actively be aware of how you are perpetuating things. Just like you would turn off the faucet when you brush your teeth, you have to turn off the faucet of leaking racist thoughts in your head. Whether you are white, brown, black, or yellow, whatever you may be, but especially if you are white, you need to turn that tap off. You need to turn it off. Turn it off on your end and on everyone other, all the other white people's ends, right? Like, I'm getting worked up over this because I feel like there's so many people out there who think they are not racist, and they might be. They might not be internally racist, but because they are participating in a system that produces racism based on white supremacy, they are still participating in it and perpetuating it because they're not turning off the faucet. They are still contributing to climate change. They're still contributing to white supremacy and racism. They are still contributing to sexism. If you are not out there as a man checking other men when they treat women badly, you are contributing to sexism. If you are not out there being like a pro breastfeeding in public type of man, but you're okay with women who have their boobs out and their junk sticking out in public, all open for people to see, you have some double standards that you need to get checked, right? Just like that. Just like that man who sees breasts as a sexual thing and has a problem with breastfeeding. Just like that man, there are lots of white people out there that have issues with black and brown people on the inside, but they don't manifest it on the outside, and yet they have double standards without even realizing it. Like the people who I encountered in my retail experiences. So I just wanted to get that out because it was just boiling up in me, and it's been a rough few weeks because of all this Islamophobia and whatnot, but more so just the daily struggle of combating racism as a Muslim woman of color, you know, a minority. It gets a lot sometimes. It piles up. So thank you for involuntarily or voluntarily acting as my sounding board. I hope that we can do this again if you are okay with it. Anyways, inshallah, or anyways, take care, and I will talk to you soon. Assalamu alaikum.